And we're back on the Fowler Show, and I'm asking the question that I ask at the end of every show. Can we all just get along? Yes, indeed, America, that is the question. Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices are open to the possibility that Pennsylvania's congressional map may violate the state's constitution. The state's map gives Republicans an insane advantage. The GOP consistently has been able to win 13 of the state's 18 congressional seats, despite winning just 50% of the vote. This needs to be fixed, America. Bigly, as President Trump would say. Now, this past map, which was drawn, I don't know, what are we at, 2017? So it was drawn 8 years ago. So the PA map is one of the worst gerrymandered maps in the country. Remember, Pennsylvania is a swing state. I would argue it's purple, right, for the purposes of this conversation. That should mean that if Pennsylvania has 18 congressional districts, it should probably split like 9 Republican, 9 Democrat. But because of how the map is drawn, 13 seats go to the Republicans and the rest go to the Democrats. And how they do it is they call what we call it, gerrymandering, or basically they stack the district. So they put all the minorities, as many minorities as you can find, in one district. They call them majority districts, and they pack them all in. So they get all the black people, put all the black people together. And the only rule is that the district has to be contiguous. So it has to be connected. So they'll do crazy things like connect the district on a road and to get everybody in there, right? And they'll get all the Hispanics together and give them a district. And then everything else will go to, you guessed it, Republicans. So here's how this all goes down. So in the last election, now in the state of Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court is something that is on the ballot. The voters of Pennsylvania elect their state Supreme Court. So there was recently an election, the balance of the court flipped, and these justices took a hard look at this map. And I mean, this map it's pretty wild if you take a look at it carefully. You're like, whoa, they just sort of packed all the Democrats in and they gave the Republicans everything else. But in orders that happened this past Monday, depending on when you're watching the show, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that congressional district maps adopted by the Pennsylvania legislature in 2011, and this is the ruling, I want to read it as it was stated, clearly, plainly violate the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and on that sole basis, we hereby strike it as unconstitutional. The court ordered a full opinion. The court's orders a full opinion explaining the court's legal reasoning is still forthcoming. But basically what this says here is that the courts aren't feeling this map, America, which means they will have to redraw it in a more equitable way to give the voters of Pennsylvania a fair say. Because basically when they gerrymander districts, they take away people's say, right? They take away people's chances to have their say in Congress. And you're like, Richard, what do you mean when you say that? I'm going to explain it to you. So when they put all the African Americans in one district, it doesn't matter what happens, right? The district doesn't become competitive, and basically the district all goes one direction. Whereas if they were to split those African Americans into 2 districts, those African Americans' votes would be more powerful, right? But that's not true for Republicans, right? Because if Republicans are winning more seats, their votes have more power. You get what I'm saying? Is it making sense? Nod your head in agreement if it's making sense. Okay, so some people are still leery on this. Let me say it another way. So in a situation where all liked people are packed together, their voices are muted because they only have one representative. If it was drawn fairly, without political rankling or without political influence, these same voters would likely have a better say, because they would say, well, if you're in Pennsylvania, we'll split it along, we would go along, we'll split along natural borders, along expressways, along city lines, and therefore people would have a greater say in they would have a greater say in who they vote to Congress, and thus by having a greater say in who you vote for Congress, you'd have more representation, it would be more adequately representative of the state, and thus Pennsylvania would be, the democracy, you would have a better chance at democracy. That means you have a better chance at life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I can go on and on about this stuff. But Republican lawmakers are now tasked with redrawing the state's congressional districts to sort out, basically they have to draw the districts and they have to do it in a more equitable way and a fairer way that give both, and it's not about partisanship. This is about giving Pennsylvania voters their democracy back. Because right now they don't have it. They've lost it now. Now they're sort of operating in this gray area between tyranny and democracy. Tyranny in that Republicans have amassed all this power because they've mutilated the map to benefit them. And Democrats don't have any power, and a lot of voters are trapped in districts where they don't have much of a say. It's bad. It's very bad. But this is just the beginning, because we're seeing this happen all across the country. Remember in North Carolina, we saw a case very similar to gerrymandered districts getting called all the way to the Supreme Court, which I guess is the next question you're asking. Richard, does this go to the Supreme Court? Now, here is why this will likely not go to the Supreme Court. So in their ruling, the wording of the court's short statement has vital implications for the finality of the court's orders. While the Supreme Court, which will weigh in on constitutionality of partisan gerrymandering before the end of its term in June, often hears cases about congressional redistricting, it can't hear any case it wants. Rather, its jurisdiction is limited to cases generally that involve some dispute over federal law versus state law. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court explicitly said that the sole basis of the ruling was the state constitution, meaning the Supreme Court, unless there is unless the U.S. Constitution supersedes that, has no jurisdiction over the Pennsylvania Constitution, thus ruling out the possibility of this going to the Supreme Court where the balance is tipped conservative, meaning Republicans have nowhere else to go. Nowhere to run to, baby. There's nowhere to hide. Republicans will have to redraw this damn map, and it's about damn time. Because this gerrymandering has led to Republican control of the House, which leads us to the government shutdown. All these things are connected. It's all connected. The reason why we can get nothing done in Congress is because the districts are drawn in a way that basically limits out the ability for us to have compromise, because there are no swing districts. You have very Republican districts and very Democratic districts. And the Democrats say, and the Democrats are like, screw you, we don't have to work with you. Republican districts are drawn to the point where they screw you, we don't have to work with you. And thus you have government shutdowns, because there's nobody in the middle saying, well, listen, I've got to do what's best for my voters, and my voters are in the middle. They want to see a Washington that works, like a majority of Americans do. But a majority of these Americans are trapped in districts where a majority of the people in their district are one way or another. That sounds a little bit confusing. But this map thing is very confusing. But let me break it down for you like this. So, if you are a Republican and you live in Philadelphia, your voice really doesn't matter. Because you are in a district that is so gerrymandered and skewed towards the Democrats that your vote is irrelevant. It might as well not show up to the polls. Whereas then if it was a more equitably drawn district, your vote would have a greater say. Same goes for Democrats who live in Republican districts, right? If the district is drawn so Republican, where your voice doesn't matter, your voice doesn't have a say. And so these members get to be at the polls, the polar opposites, and not move to the middle, which is why you have government shutdowns, which is why you have a lack of government, which is why we don't have budgets, which is why we can't get anything done for the American people, which is why we can't come up for a solution to our broken immigration system. And I can go on and on and on and on about the problems created thanks to gerrymandering. And the other problem you have is it saves really bad incumbents, people who should not be in Congress. You know who I'm talking about. People like Louis Gohmert, who should just not be there. They're a waste of time, space, and air.